Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this SPAC's APAC virtual main stage. Our discussion today is occupiers on hospitality. And a key question is, how do we, as CRE leaders, successfully blend real estate and hospitality to create the ideal experience? My co-host and I today will discuss how experience has impacted the way we design and manage workplace services, and implement technology in order to continue fostering our corporate culture and even in some cases influence HR policies. I'm Carol Wong, the Total Workplace Lead for APAC at Cushman & Wakefield, and I will be a host for this session. Before we start, let me introduce my awesome team of co-hosts. We have Natalie Hall, APAC of Workplace Program Manager in Lincoln, Riku Pentikanan, Regional Directors Asian in Microsoft, Simon Wise, Head of Property Enablement and Group Property, Standard Chartered Bank, Caroline Court, Head of Global Workplace, Community and Innovation at Ericsson, and last but not the least, Jean Wong, Head of Revs at APAC for Novartis. So instead of a facilitated Q&A panel style type of sessions, I'd like to invite all my co-hosts to treat it more like a conversations. I'll pose questions and direct to everyone. Okay, let's start with some hard facts here. Our global survey SSF at home have shown that most companies have maintained their productivity during the last 12 months, but face challenges in maintaining the cultures or the social aspect of working in an office. Now, the many parts of APAC are slowly but surely returning to the office. Many companies are offering their employees a choice of where they want to work from. Because of this, hospitality and employee experience have become fundamental to us as CRE. So Natalie, how are you at LinkedIn viewing this, and how are you enabling your workplace to support your people and business needs, especially post-pandemic?
Thanks, Carol. So we've taken sort of the approach. We know everything has changed. It's not the same way of working as it was pre-COVID. So we know that some people, we need to have the flexibility, and that some people definitely want to stay working from home. Some people are not yet comfortable to return back to the office. But we're also finding those who do return to the office and the ones which are at home, we need to basically collaborate between the two and foster that culture that we've always had when everybody was in the office. So we're looking at how we can do that. And we know that we need to, obviously technology, and we need to rely on the technology and looking at ways that we can sort of connect the two, like when they're in the office and with the people at home. And that might be just making sure that the video conferencing facility is up to speed, and maybe different sort of video points. We've got a few different options that we're looking at, but also when people do come into the office, we want to make sure that when they do come in, that sort of pre-COVID, I guess, culture and that experience and the buzzer when they're in the office still exists. So people do want to come back to the office if they do feel safe when they return. And that's sort of going back to looking at what's bringing people into the office. Why do people want to come into the office? And it's usually, most people are missing that people on people connection. So it's not, and some people want to come back because they can focus better and they seem to feel like they get a lot more done. We're in the office. So we're looking at different ideas on changing our current layout. So instead of everybody having their own individual desks, making it a bit more, maybe a bit more flexible working point, and having sort of more collaboration areas or quiet zones for people so they can just come in and focus. And more flexible, so people don't have to sit at the same spot. They can sit with other teams, they can sit with other people, and looking at sort of more that way, which is quite a change for us, which is good and is exciting.
Oh, Simon, I'm just going to direct to you. And how I know Standard Chartered have done quite a lot, and we heard a couple of times as well from Sheridan. Would you want to share with us on what is the latest with Standard Chartered?
Thanks, Carol. So the latest, I mean, we've rolled this out around about 45,000 of our employees at the moment, and 85% of those have asked for more flexibility in the future. So we're trying to now determine what does that mean. We've obviously got the different, within the contracts already, 1st of April was our go live date. So we know what people are expecting to do to come back to the office. So that's giving us some great ratios to play with. And that then enables us to then redesign the offices, because obviously where job roles allow you, we're not going to be doing what we were doing pre-COVID. The idea to attract people back to the office is really around the collaboration, the socialization piece. Obviously, dependent upon the market, and we're all in some very interesting markets about what home working means to various people, and different ages as well. How far along the property ladder one is and how much space one can have to work varies greatly. And all this has got to be considered. Do we have a finite answer now? No, we don't. Do we have some clear strategies and some very busy teams working on this at the moment? Yes, we do.
Maybe just let me move on. Maybe Jean, I know Novartis have a wide range of demographic within your workforce, and recently with your RevX program, how's the workplace hospitality changed to suit the different employees' needs?
Yeah, maybe taking a step back from RevX, and before I introduce RevX and what that is to everyone on the call, sometime during the initial part of pandemic, we, in June last year, Novartis launched a choice program. So choice and responsibility is a program whereby employees, very much like what Natalie and Simon was talking about, giving the choice to the employees to choose what's and how are the most productive self and where are the most productive self. So they can choose where they want to work from, but this has to be with responsibility and very much team aligned, right? Then you bring back to when the team wants to have a team day, and that collaboration, bring the team back to the office, comes as a conversation of how do we bring them back to the office. So that choice program was an interesting one because that's where personas are looked into, very close to what Simon was talking about, right? You have different demographics, and you have different people with a different part of the corporate ladder, right? And different needs of space. And of course, with the different personas, that kind of guide us to better design and future-proof our space. And we took the opportunity when offices are shut down to really look into this, on how do we revise and look into our design guidelines overall, and also experiment on different ways of working. It could be things that are, it could be experiments that are not just related to space, but related to very much HR policies and the way that people would like to work, like working hours, etc. So those experiments were carried out during the course of last year. There's a lot of learnings that came out from it. So when it comes to the environment piece, that's where we stand, in bringing that workplace experience as part of the choice to all the employees. And then coming to RevX, when they do come back to the office and when everybody return, much like what Natalie mentioned, we want that experience to be still there, right? We want still the wow, that feels a little different. Office is for collaboration. I'd like to come back and see my colleagues. And RevX is a program whereby we look at workplace experience really as 3 segments: service, environment, and enabling technology. And what I just talked about, the choice and the design guidelines and having activity-based working, we looked into the workplace and occupancy planning. Those are very much the environment pillar. And RevX is very much in-depth looking into the service pillar of what does it mean getting the house in order, the hygiene factors, right? Doing what we are already doing, but doing it better, doing it in excellence, and connecting back to the end user when they come back. What has changed from the needs from before COVID, post-COVID, when things are stabilized, and also really getting the rewards back to that layer of frontline employees who are impacting your, the everyday experience of your employees. So I think that recognition piece is very much missed in a lot of the programs. And this is one of the 3 focus that we have in RevX. So that's how I was saying, when we talk about choice, there is the persona that comes into play. But when we talk about experience, we're trying to hit a certain minimum standard. And so personas doesn't really come into play in that category of discussion.
Riku, do you have anything, did you share the same thing at Microsoft or doing slightly differently when it comes to experience?
Well, it really depends on kind of the end user group we're talking about. For engineers, one thing that Natalia was talking about there earlier in terms of ensuring the connectivity between the teams that are at the office versus our home, that's super important, because what we find, again, specific to engineers, is that the senior engineers are happy. They probably have better living accommodation, better connectivity, and nobody's bugging them. Nobody's, giving them a hard time. Nobody's tapping them on the shoulders. They're coding away. But the junior engineers are not developing the way they used to, because there is no organic connection between the two. The junior engineers need the senior engineers to kind of grow and learn. So that's one area where we're focusing on in terms of ensuring that when we do return, obviously in China, we are fully back to the same level as we used to be before, that we have that connection at the office, and even if we kind of shift days and so forth, we continue kind of harvest and bring the junior engineers up. Then if I think about sales side, again, the experience is very different than it used to be, because we from one element it stays the same, which is we already had the flexibility. There's no dedicated seating, what have you, and there's been ability to work from anywhere before. So that hasn't really changed. What's changed for us for sales is if pre-pandemic, if a given period of time we had 10 customer meetings face-to-face, and it was first and foremost because the customers wanted to meet face-to-face. Now we do see that going forward, it will only be in the same period of time, it will only be 2 to 3 meetings face-to-face, and the rest will be virtual, which will then create quite a demand in terms of our virtual, how do we virtually kind of create that inclusive environment? What we have here, like this is not inclusive. This is, we're talking heads. We don't feel that we're in the same space, and we don't necessarily feel that connected. And so that's something that, we are, as a company, we are working on in terms of how can we just make the meeting experience more inclusive. And therefore, for example, for our sales, then when we meet with customers, how can we be, feel that we're in the same space while we wouldn't be. Then if we want to kind of take that to the next level, this is my favorite area, again, if I'm working from home here, what I'm lacking from working at the office is the ad hoc connection to the team members there. I can go on Teams and I can see so-and-so is online, hey, let me ping you, but I don't see them. I don't hey, now that I see. And that's one of the best sides of the office. So then we're looking at kind of how can we use spatial computing and augmented reality to do that. So if I'm here at my home, I'm working away on my laptop, and I have an AR device on, I can still see my laptop. But then when I look up and I look around, I see the people I work with. I see Natalia and others based on my workplace analytics information, which is feeding of Office 365 on who I interact with. Those people, if they have the same setup, start to show up in my visibility at my home. So I can go and tap them, whether they're at their home or whether they're at the office. And again, that's a means of kind of creating an inclusive environment, working environment, where you're not handicapped if you're working from home or you're working from the office. You should have kind of from that perspective the same possibilities and ability to connect with others.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Because I recall many years ago where we have that telepresence, right, at home. Yeah. It's almost that in a meeting that we are all sharing the same virtual space, especially for, I believe all of us are either in regional role or global role. The night meetings get a bit lonely sometimes when you're just behind the computer screen and see nobody. Yeah, I agree with that. There's just on the different demographics. Caroline, I know Ericsson's have sort of, reiterate your future of the workplace as well, coming with different personas. Would you share a little bit in terms of how you're getting on to pilot these programs and some of the, is there any differences that you see from country to country, especially in APAC? We have quite diverse culture here.
Absolutely. So similar to what Jean was saying, and actually Riku as well, we're recognizing the different job roles that happen within our company. I mean, we're 100,000 people over, gosh, probably around circa 400 locations, covering all aspects of the business. But what we really wanted to do, and we achieved through a series of due diligence exercises in 2020, including the infamous Leeson survey, which a few other companies seem to be doing, is that we recognized a total of 5 personas. And these are really down to characteristics and behaviors, the working choices of individuals, regardless of their location, their job scope, their job stage. It's really about their choices and what they need to be as motivated and engaged as possible, whether they're working from home, working offsite, customer location, or indeed in the physical branded workspace. So through that, and similar to everyone else's journeys, we've reassessed the workplace ecosystem as a whole, trying to create that sort of seamless, singular experience. Again, coming back through the 2 different physical locations, which is the home or the office, or any other third space, but also making sure that regardless of where you are, the digital experience is absolutely seamless, so that it doesn't create a fragmentation and any issues. You still feel connected to the company. So coming back to your point about the pilots or experiments that we're making a determined labeling of, because there's no right or wrong. This is a real voyage of discovery for everyone at the moment, and we have to emphasize that to everyone. So through the core experiments, we have a total of about 6 to 8 happening on a global basis, where we can really trial, evaluate, prototype these different styles of workspaces, and also the sort of the assumptions and the science that sits behind that, so that we're really designing space which works for these different personas. So we have a couple in Asia. We also have a couple in Europe and Americas. Nothing is live as yet, so it's a bit too early to sort of see how the differences are coming across in terms of the uptake and the success of the differences that we're making. But as I said, it's a real voyage of discovery, and it's quite an exciting time to see how it's being responded to, seeing the positive response that we're getting from our end users across the business, and also finding the balance about how we pitch this, because obviously there's still a different state about when people are back to the office as yet, the situation with the home country. So there's quite a balancing act to try and find how we, as I said, pitch and deliver this as best as possible, being sensitive to everyone before we can look at the assessment of the actual core concepts themselves. So it's quite an exciting, busy time, but it sounds similar. All the other panelists are sort of on a similar journey, which is actually quite reassuring for those of us working in charge of designing these new concepts.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I think this is, in my years of experience, I think this is really the inputting us from a real estate standpoint as a limelight, that we get to start to create and do a lot of testing and sort of, having additional or creatively using different, budgets to actually do that. Going back to one thing that Riku mentions about, different technologies, and definitely technologies has becoming fundamentals and essential components, right, to influence experience. And I'm going to just throw whether Natalie or Riku, how you mentioned technology have changed, but how does it influence from a data collection standpoint? Because at the end of the day, we can be as creative as we want, but we will still be asked, right? How do you quantify the productivities? How do we quantify the value? It would be great to just hear from everyone, what's your take on how do you leverage the technology to collect data, and also how do we measure effectiveness?
I think one of the benefits of being in APAC at the moment is because we're a lot further ahead than our counterparts in EMEA or Americas. So we are kind of piloting or trialing a lot of the initiatives that we're coming up with, which is great for us, gives us a lot of sort of visibility. So one of the things that we are looking at, and we understand that we need the data, especially because I think we're offering a much more of a flexible workplace, where then we're giving people sort of a bit more flexibility of whether they, even in the future post-COVID, whether they want to work from home sort of a few days of the week or come into the office. So we need the data and we definitely need to get data in so we can, especially like for our food program or certain other things like how many people are coming into the office. So we are going to be looking at piloting like sensor technology, and maybe looking at sort of like either in the workspaces, and so we can sort of monitor or sort of get an idea of how many people are actually coming into the office, and when they're in the office, what spaces are they using, how do they use the space, and try to get the data around that. And once we've got a bit more data, when we open up a bit more, then we can start re-looking at how's our office actually need to, is it working as it is, do we need to make changes, and take it from there. So I think data and having the analytics is super important, especially going forward.
Yeah, if I'll add on top, very much on the same lines, using video analytics to understand behavior in space. But not only video analytics, but then looking at, I mentioned earlier, workplace analytics, which is on the back of Office 365, which tells you how people are interacting with one another. That's a very important data point. Then further to that, kind of leveraging some of the Microsoft collateral in terms of the analytics that we can pull on engineering side. We can look at amount of code, quality of code, speed of code, and time of code review, time of code submission, and a whole host of KPIs like that. So we can then correlate any change in the physical environment to changes in those metrics that we can see. So therefore, kind of the post-COVID workplace in the case of engineering, which is a maturity of our portfolio, will be an iterative process where we will look at the current state. We will do changes into the space. We will look at how the metrics change. And it won't be just one team, or because if it's one team, two team, like, you know, that there's so many variables that can impact their productivity as well. But we have volume of engineering where we can track this. So we can kind of do this iterative process whereby we will kind of work our way to the appropriate solution for the engineering teams. Now, if there's one thing that we know is that the solution won't be a one size fits all. I think as an industry, and at least at our end, we're going away from a fixed, you know, this is our fixed guideline. And this is everybody will get. Teams work in different manners, and that's where the data I mentioned in the beginning in terms of understanding behavior in space comes in and informs us better. So we have an underlying program, space program, for example, for engineering, but then on top of that, we will adjust and customize to the local culture, to the behavior in that location, how to the working habits of that location. Then lastly, now what I outlined there is still a very static workplace environment. I'd say as an industry that if you look at what we offer the same thing that has been offered freaking 100 years. It hasn't changed. It's like bricks and mortar walls and so on. But what we want to get to is a much more flexible workplace where we get a flag when behavior in space changes. Behavior goes from being more collaborative to more concentrative, or there's a numbers of changes that can happen. Then that should trigger a automatic change in the physical environment to better suit that new behavior. And therefore our real estate or our workplace should become more fluid, if you will. There shouldn't be any tickets. Tickets, should go to hell. But the space should change itself organically. That I'm outlining kind of a couple of years out, but I think that was the direction we were proceeding with already pre-pandemic. I think the pandemic has kind of highlighted the need of the flexibility of the space, which is exactly kind of what we want to offer through that.
Rico, I think you make a really interesting point about tickets. You and I share the same sentiment on those, but this is something that we're not say battling with, but discovering that there's sort of there's a sort of a triangle for the data. There's one, the data that real estate need to best manage the ecosystem and collecting all of that. There's also the data that the users need so that they feel comfortable with the dynamic choices they're making. So where they're asking for this flexibility, they're actually making really informed decisions based on what they need, the team, unfortunately the expectations of their managers, because that's a longer change process. So it's trying to marry the system so that we as real estate experts create or obtain the data that we use to support analytics and the continuous progression and the provision of the real estate services, and also how that same or similar data can be used to support the user experiences. Then it sort of comes together in that third point of the triangle about this massive, enormous data lakes we're creating, where you have, you're pulling together the output from all the different solutions, whether it's tracking the sensors, tracking the availability, if indeed there's still tickets being raised for any service style issues, and how you create the sort of the back end, the lower part of the iceberg, if you will, where you can really sort of bring all of that information together in a intelligent format so that you can start creating and doing the trends analysis behind the scenes. That's certainly a challenge and an area where I'm learning very quickly about IT and all things data system related. That's not to say it was unexpected in this journey, but it's the volume of time that's demanding from us is not to be underestimated. I feel. Be interested to see if anyone else has had the same issue. Well, not issue, but experience.
And then throw a GDPR into that mix.
Oh yeah, that's before we've even got to privacy. Yeah, that's an experience, let's say.
Yeah, I do agree. It's very time consuming. I think we use a lot of data as well, and a lot of analysis. I do agree that it gives both parties, both the user and also our teams, enough data to make better informed decisions. But what we have constantly emphasized, be it talking to stakeholders or even to the end user, is that these will change again and again, and it evolves, right? The personas, even whatever that we've placed them into, they change, and the business need change. So as that changes, as those changes come to us, I think we need to maintain that agile mindset to be able to cater to the evolved needs and to embrace that nuances that's between sites and between countries and also between regions. It's going to be all different and going to be slightly different or vastly different, right? And that maintaining that agility mindset, that it's okay that we make a mistake and it's okay that it doesn't work later, that is also okay to tweak it. And some people I think some stakeholders are very uncomfortable doing that. I think it's also part of our role to actually, reassure. And that for me comes as part of experience, but experience from the stakeholder perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just curious, Simon. I know Standard Chartered have, with part of your new testing program and pilots. Would you share with us in terms of technology? Because I believe you guys also have invested a lot in terms of technologies as well to enable the organizations.
So we've obviously got the smart space, which is allowing the end user to have choice within their and how they use the space, and then obviously we have the sensors to manage and track how the space is then being used. But as everyone is saying here, we've got strategies which we're driving towards half a space, twice the experience. We have started to create what does done look like, or what's good in these areas, and we'll have to start measuring against those. But the challenge is obviously the take up of these new ways of working are slow or different across all of our footprints. So it was interesting. Jean said around agile. It's definitely the new ways of working the bank is rolling out, and so that what we have today, we're going to continually to challenge and continually to keep designing and creating new spaces as they're used. Also, to Riku's point, a lot of what we are doing today is really speeding up what we have talked about for a long time, but it is really bringing those relationships between what property has been saying with HR, and it really has got into contracts, which again is giving us other data points to help drive ratios, which we struggled with historically, as well as the IT side of things, which is not our applications which we're trying to drive to manage the space, but the sort of the collaborative tool sets that have come along through COVID. It's amazing what we have been able to turn on in the bank in a short period of time, which we've struggled for years, and we have a pipeline of activity which will just continue on that way to improve our productivity.
And how about about effectiveness, and how are we measuring effectiveness? I know this is a very difficult questions we have been trying to solve that coming up with formulas or different formulas to address that. What's your thought around it? I mean, we have run surveys and surveys, at least I have seen surveys going around, but anyone have any thoughts around effectiveness itself? How do we really measure that, and so that we could serve them better, right, in creating the better experiences?
I don't have an answer for your effectiveness measurement, but what we do see as a challenge is as people come partially back to the office, and you have some people working from home, that hybrid meeting environment has become a real big challenge for some countries where the enabling technology hasn't really caught up yet. So, and even so, even if you have the best of the worlds of technology, and you could feel like you are indeed in the same room, often people feel left out at the after call conversation, that as you pack up your stuff and leave the meeting room, that conversation, that is something that people are missing out. So that will become a challenge as people come back to the office and get stabilized. I don't know if anybody within the panel has a comment about that or sharing.
Jean, I think that's a really good point, and that's something we're incredibly aware of. Hasn't happened yet because I mentioned we're still working from home until middle of later Q2 at the very earliest. But yeah, it's this unexpected or unintended hierarchy that could happen depending whether you're at home, in the office, and again, how you overcome that. And I think it's going to be very much down to re-educating and working very, very closely with not only the leaders throughout the business, but everyone to really understand that cultural nuance and that dynamic and how we manage ourselves, but also the teams to really try and as much as we can to avoid any different sort of social discourse. I suppose you could put it in, like you said, that side conversation, what happens around the coffee point. So it's how we can create those similar style of interactions within the ecosystem, regardless of where you are, rather than just assuming that, not to say assuming, but expecting that a lot of those social dynamics will still happen within the office, and you have a category of people who are missing out. It's certainly something on the forefront, but we haven't found the magic formula. I'll let you know when we do, because it's going to be a really interesting piece, because it's so much down to sort of people dynamics, and that's something that we as real estate have to work very, very closely with our HR people team.
No, John, I have perhaps an example, and now on this one, the technology is the solution, but it's not necessarily always the solution. But I have my team offsite next week, and I have, it's a virtual offsite, but I have my India team together, my China team together, and then the rest of us use HoloLenses and augmented reality. But then we decided that we'll have in Singapore, we'll have a dinner. But then my team member in Japan, he will miss out on, exactly kind of the after work, conversation and so on. So how can we, do that in a way where we feel that we're in the same space? So this is ending up being a Microsoft products commercial, but we're using HoloLens. We're going to a Japanese restaurant where we have a cabinet, and we're using HoloLens and Microsoft Mesh, which is a kind of a virtual collaboration platform, so that we can all be there, we can all see each other, and we can all eat Japanese food, and he'll be included in the discussion. That's as close as we can come right now in terms of doing the after work conversation and social in the same space.
It's really sounds fun. I would like to be in one of those events. Well, before I pose a question, I just want to highlight to all the listening audience that there is a chat function that you can use to ask questions. We will come to the questions later on towards the end of the hours. But just going back to what Caroline, Enrique, and Jean said, it's about cultures, right? And change management becomes unprecedented importance right now, and not just the change of how we use our workplaces, but the change in and around on how people, managers like us, managing our teams. What is the alignment with the teams? Like how much effort do we have to put more, like Riku says, to actually create events that we can really become virtually together, right? So, and that is one of the biggest challenge and effort that I see at the moment is change component in it. And I think most importantly is the collaborations with HR, because to do change on our own as real estate, I think it will be a big gap. I think it will have a lot more success when we bring our HR partners on board on this one. Maybe Caroline, can we just share maybe and I will move across the board here, but is there any new different approaches that you and your HR at Ericsson's have taken with this whole journey?
Absolutely. So I think fundamentally we're coming at this as a three-pronged attack. You could say there's real estate, there's IT, and there's the people work streams. And whilst we have our own initiatives under each work stream, there's very clearly sort of the horizontal or vertical cross collaboration between those different work streams, and where the initiatives, I think it was Riku or someone said earlier that yes, real estate used to be very much about the bricks and mortar, but we're pushing so much more towards the social element, what the sort of the activation of the workspace within the bricks and mortars that we're creating, that we have to work in absolute solidarity with people because they're the subject matter experts. So it's been a really interesting journey to have suddenly everyone around the table, and not quite a burning platform, but the issue is there that, or the forced issue that we have to work in conjunction when designing the solution so that we're covering all aspects and we're not creating a sort of a siloed approach, because everyone knows that will not be successful. So that's actually been quite refreshing, and it's also going to help us reconsider how we do this in the long run. It's not just a one-off project for 2020 and 2021. We need to adjust our ways of working into the long term.
Natalie or Jean and Simon, any more collaboration with the HR, or has HR actually come up with different policies and working from home policies and so forth? Any approaches that we should like to share with us?
We have probably, I think through the pandemic, we've worked a lot closer with a lot of our key sort of different areas than we normally would. So HR has been a key partner, but so is like our health and safety, the security, our legal teams, making sure that we're compliant on things. So we've sort of created like a core little team now. So for any stage, when we move to the different stages, or we've got new ideas that we want to implement, we've got this core group of all the different people, including our communications team. So we all get together and we will sort of establish the ideas or the process, how it's going to work. And then we all sort of roll that up to our key stakeholders, and then we get the alignment. So we found now that we've got this quite a good system. If we want to sort of put out a new initiative, or we want to open a new area or make changes, we're all on board with it before we go sort of to the leadership team, and it makes it a lot easier to get things approved. And so yeah, we've collaborated, we've got the alignment with all the different teams, and it just makes things a lot easier for us. And I think all around, and I think that's going to continue going forward, especially with all the different changes, which we know things are not going to be the same as they were pre-COVID. So there's going to be a lot of changes as we open up more. And we've just built that sort of foundation. And I think the trust that as a real estate team and a workplace team, when we make the changes, we're generally making the right decisions and the right changes. So we've sort of earned that trust over this pandemic time, and that's going to be in our benefit going forward, definitely.
Just, I'd like to mirror that. I mean, the trust that the property delivery teams have been able to generate through the COVID year has been amazing, and it has really brought a lot of teams together. One area that our health and safety team has really been driving is the wellness side. And that was obviously through the pandemic and making sure that everybody was able to keep functioning when we were in lockdown or whatever, and that obviously varied around the world. And now that has developed into a program to continue that, not just around as we bring people back into the whatever the new office will be looking like and how that works, but obviously to support the ongoing flexibility, which will be completely varied based on the individuals and how they want to work going forward.
Yeah, so Carol, similar to Simon and Natalie, so we've come really much closer and definitely, and a couple of stripes on the shirt for the property team through the pandemic. The whole choice with responsibility program that was launched was really top-down endorsed from the C-suite. So that is actually a HR lab program, and very, very clearly HR lab program where, facility, in this case, real estate is one of the enabling pillar, just like technology. So it kind of is totally changed from, previous programs where we kind of are the ones trying to push and drive, and with the pandemic, it helped to, as a catalyst. But this program truly is HR led, which is very, very different. And they're involved they're in the driving seat. So in every country where that conversation starts, it becomes a lot easier, especially in things like ratio and things like, when we touch on footprint and forgoing certain things or optimizing certain areas, that becomes a much easier conversation.
Yeah, or storage, right?
Yes. Of paper.
How much can we do offsite storage and how much can we detox? I think that's one of the most fun things that we have talked, and certainly in this whole pandemic, it really drives us on truly digitizations in our work process. These are all great stuff, and frankly, I mean, in my different projects, different experience, I certainly think that a lot of HR partners have started to really, come more forward into a partnership with different real estate across the board. I think one thing that go back to really, we do need their advocates as well to help the leaders to start to say things slightly differently. And we do see now a lot of time that influence also how they actually weighs in their or start to redefine their employee value propositions. Maybe one of the last questions before we jump into the questions. I know there's a couple of questions here that in the audience that posted, but last one, I think, Simon, with the increased demand expectation of experience, right? Who do you look to deliver these experiences at Standard Chartered Bank? Would you expect landlords to provide more in the building, or would the rest be, on the occupiers like yourself or even consultants?
Well, we're a heavily outsourced team, so we are very reliant on our consultants. Obviously, the retained team comes up with some great ideas and defines the ultimate strategy, but the delivery of which is then really put through our supply partners. Now, that's, again, moving at pace. I smiled when I saw this first question in the preparatory works. If we waited for the landlords, unfortunately, I'm not sure that we would be in the position we're in now. So we had to take that control. So we have, as others have mentioned on this call, we've relooked at our what we call SC foundations, which is our design guidelines, and revised those to suit the new journey, the new what does done look like, and the success factors. We're obviously looking now with a cross-party team, which is cross-functional across the bank, but also with our supply partners and also some of the consultants from the market to help us operationalize those and what does the experience look like in the future for people as they come back. So it's a continual piece, and we continue use externals to help us deliver the ideas and the strategies that the in-house team come up with.
Anyone have any other thoughts?
Very similar to Simon.
One thing that I observe as recently is when Jim, when back in our P&G days, we have this extensive site selection metrics, right? And right now, some of the projects that are involved in, the whole amenities have just a laundry list. It becomes heavily weightage as opposed to before, and that makes, I think that makes landlords right now a lot more interested to understand, especially all of you, these big occupiers, what do you want and what do they need, and so that they can better service as well. So I think that is definitely a good opportunity for us to drive more out of our landlords, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
The opportunity,
sorry, go ahead, Caroline.
Sorry, Jean, thank you. Yeah, I agree with Simon that it's interesting to see how quickly the landlords can adapt, and that's heavily dependent on the market and the maturity. But I think the pressure is also going to come from the supplier side. I mean, yes, you have the traditional real estate consultants, suppliers, FM providers, but actually where we're seeing those companies, especially the startups, those more anchored towards prop tech, but also those actually moving more in towards the services and the hospitality, they can move a lot at a much higher pace than other traditional corporates who supply similar services. So I think it's actually going to create a bit more competition within the market, which is actually an opportunity for the occupiers. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, not only in 12 months, but probably throughout the next 5 years. It could be quite a journey.
And just on that, I think the one thing to consider is, when you look at kind of post-pandemic, what are the reasons that employees want to come back to the office? One is the social fabric, getting connected with their team members, having those ad hoc connections, but also things like, health and well-being and so forth. And therefore, what is it that, the landlords can offer in the new realm? And what is it that we can enhance through kind of a more active community management? Because community management is something we spoke about HR earlier. It's one of those things that easily gets missed between real estate, HR, and so forth. And at least in our case, we've taken much more role in the community management together with our HR, working with them. Just to ensure that when employees do return, we are hitting all those points why they feel it's important to come back to the office.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let me move into the questions. I know we are closing up to the hours. We have a question on the role of a third sites, especially in areas with low tech infrastructures, like internet connectivities and long commute times where employees actually leave. Some of the sites like co-working have created more dynamic hospitality environments. The role of the third site, I think maybe Jean and Simon, I think you're living it right now. Would you have comments on that?
Yeah, we did take the advantage of the pandemic in 2020 and did a quick pilot with JustGo, what they call Switch. For those of you, if you're based out of Singapore, you may know this program. It's a pay by the minute as you go, and you can use the hot desk area in all the JustGo centers plus all the pods in the shopping malls. So this we see as a good alternative, as a third alternative to home and office, especially in the event, in the period of time when we were not allowed to be more than 50% in the office. Some people just don't have the conducive environment to work from home, and this kind of give them that choice and that environment, another alternative. So it actually works very well for us.
Yeah, and again, at the bank, we've partnered with the supplier, and we're running that out in a few countries to see how that works. But we're also looking to see how could we use some of our other real estate, such as branches, for instance, to create that sort of mid office, which sits between downtown and our back offices. So yes, exploring it, another one of those areas where we're studying it to see take up and how people can work. But interesting how we went through that, and then we've always been traveling, and we've always been working from hotels and airports before now without any problems, and we come up with a third site provider, and the hoops, the regulations that we have to jump through to be able to do that from a financial industry aspect is also very interesting to look at. So throws other constraints at us, unintended impacts.
Yeah. Actually, Rico, I have one private chat question. They are really curious, what does a HoloLens look like?
Damn, I'm at home. But you can, hey, you can Bing it. I almost said Google it, but you can Bing it. But HoloLens is basically, it's a clear glass here with a light device around your head. It gives you overlaid, whether it's your right now, as I'm at my house, I could still have the view of our Sydney office, for example, and I could move around in the Sydney office just through the HoloLens. But yeah, please look it up.
Right. Looks like we at the end of the hours, and it has been a great conversations, and I really appreciate everyone's time and insight on the occupiers, on the hospitality and experience. So a big thank you to all my co-hosts, and thank you to all our listening audience and your questions. And if we're not able to answer all the questions, please feel free to approach any one of us at the network workings tables later today or tomorrow.